I interviewed Taryn Eyton, an adventure blogger and the author of a backpacking guidebook. Her story is a testament to the way something small can become a life-changing venture. Let's hear it from her. So I'll just start off by asking you if you can tell me a little bit about yourself and what inspired you to become a blogger.
Yeah, so my name is Taryn Eyton. I live in Squamish, BC. I have been writing website happiestoutdoors.ca since 2014. I don't think that I really started to take it seriously until maybe 2017 or 18, where I realized that it could be more than a hobby. And once I realized that, I realized that there were a lot of skills that I would need to learn. And the other thing that I think has been important for me is that like a lot of bloggers and people in digital media really buy into this hustle culture that you need to be constantly working and constantly improving because you need to be constantly making more money. And I've really tried hard to push back against that because one of the reasons I quit my job to work for myself is so I'd have more time to be outside, to spend with my family, to do the other things that I like to do that are not work. I'm really happy with where I'm at. I'm also more successful than I was when I had a day job financially. And that feels pretty good. And working 6 hours a day feels pretty good too. So that's what I've done.
So can you tell me a little bit about how you fell in love with the outdoors and adventure?
In university, I found myself in the summer with a part-time job and couldn't get full-time hours. And I had a car, which a lot of my friends did. And I was like, what can I do that's pretty cheap to entertain myself with all this time off that I have? So we started going hiking, just little things now that I would even think of more of as a nature walk than a hike. And it kind of snowballed from there until right after I finished university, I hiked the West Coast Trail on Vancouver Island, which is a 75-kilometer, pretty challenging backpacking trip. It was my first backpacking trip. I had a huge backpack that was almost the same size as me. I cried the first day because it was so heavy and it was so hard. But by the end of the trip, I had just fallen in love with spending time outdoors.
Well, yeah, that's a pretty big, challenging hike for your first one.
Yeah, not a good choice in retrospect, but happy to have done it.
Yeah. All right. So, moving on to your writing process, can you give me a few habits that you do just to inspire yourself when you're writing? Just a couple of rituals, anything that you do?
I don't think that the writing part of my job is like certainly the least sexy part of my job. You know, this part where you get to stand on mountains and take photos for Instagram is definitely more glamorous. For writing, I'm fortunate enough to have a pretty good memory. So I often remember a lot more details about things than a lot of people I know. So I do take notes. And for me, it's just sitting down and having the time to write and organize my thoughts. I use the Pomodoro method, which is like a timer method of 30 minutes of writing with a timer and then a 5-minute break to surf the internet or get a cup of tea or whatever, and then back again for another 30 minutes. And that seems to work well for me.
How did you come up with the idea for your book? What inspired you to write it about that topic?
I have been kind of a dorky collector of hiking book guidebooks for a long time. I own I actually don't know how many. It's probably a couple hundred because I had been so into collecting these guidebooks. It was kind of this pie in the sky dream that one day I might write one myself. And in 2017, I was kind of burnt out and frustrated at my day job. And so I had this idea that I would just start writing one. I would just start researching. So I researched in all of my vacation time, and I took a couple of unpaid leaves of absence in the summer of 2017 and 2018. But it wasn't until after I quit my job in 2019 that the book was actually picked up by a publisher. And like the fact that somebody might actually make it into a physical book you could hold in your hand became real. For me, it was interesting because as somebody who had written primarily online for myself, I hadn't had an editor before, and I hadn't had like external parameters on what I wrote. I was really concerned about the impact that increased use on an area might have if it became more popular because it was in a book. And so I was really concerned with making sure that I mitigated some of that use by providing education. So I've been involved with Leave No Trace Canada as a volunteer since 2006. And so it was really important to me that I provided Leave No Trace education and information in my book. And sorry, there's a cat. She wants lunch. It was really important that I provided Leave No Trace education and information in my book. I've been active more recently in the last few years in park advocacy and wilderness advocacy and access restoration, and I'm familiar with how difficult that can be. I think that Leave No Trace is something that anyone who goes outdoors should make themselves familiar with. I know that a lot of people who've been going out for a long time will say like, oh, I know about Leave No Trace. That means like don't leave garbage. And it does. But it means a lot of other things as well. And
is there any specific like advice that you can give bloggers or authors that are looking to come into that industry?
Yeah, I'd say that it helps to have an angle of something that you're an expert in. So for me, you know, that's a Leave No Trace angle and a guidebook author. And I also worked in outdoor retail for a long time, so I'm quite familiar with gear stuff. But maybe your angle is that you want to explain how to do a sport as a beginner, or, you know, like you need to find your niche and what makes you an expert and someone that other people would find value in listening to your opinion.
What advice would you give someone who is just, you know, a little apprehensive to go outdoors? How would you get them to fall in love with the outdoors?
I think this is like can be really personal. And it really depends on what it is about going outdoors that you're apprehensive about. If you're apprehensive about going alone or not knowing enough about it, I think finding someone who's more experienced is super helpful. When I was first going outdoors, I spent a lot of time with friends who were more experienced, and it can be really helpful to join a club or take a course, do some reading online about the things that you're nervous about, whether that's wildlife or fitness or navigation, whatever the thing for you that you're worried about, do some reading about that or take a course about that, and you'll definitely feel a lot more confident.
Share some of your upcoming projects, your goals for the upcoming months in regards to your blog and also your writing.
Yeah, and the big thing for me that's coming up is my next book is coming out in April. It's called Backpacking on Vancouver Island. It'll come out on April 2nd. So, excuse me, I'll be doing a fair amount of, I guess, press for that coming up. Hopefully I'll have a good launch for that book.